5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thunderbirds are go.
Take a sturdy cardboard box that's about 55 by 50, maybe a little less, 45, and trace out the shape of Tracy Island. Don't cut it out. Then take a box, a plastic or paper bowl, and an empty cream cheese box. Cut the ends off your cardboard box, stick your cheese box on the top, making sure that a couple of centimeters overlap at the edge, and then cut out your plastic or paper bowl and stick that on the top as well. You want it to look kind of like this. For Thunderbird 1, cut a washing up liquid bottle or a crisp tube a couple of centimeters taller than your Thunderbird 1 toy, very important, and stick that down. For Thunderbird 3, you need a kitchen roll holder, which is a couple of centimeters taller than your Thunderbird 1 hanger. Now for the fun part. Oh, papier-mâché, paper-mâché, however you want to say it. It's amazing. You take your PVA glue and water, or you take your flour and water, you take a heck of a lot of newspaper, which you tear rather than cut, that makes it stick better, and you just layer it on. I used, I think, about 1.5 kilograms of flour and about 5 whole newspapers. You really want the papier-mâché around the swimming pool to be as high as possible, maybe even a little bit higher than the actual level of your crisp tube, but you want to leave a few centimeters at the top of your Thunderbird 3 hanger. If you're making a cave at the back, then you should stick something in there to help it keep its shape. I used one of those pet egg mad foot cheese grater things. And you're also going to want to shore up your Thunderbird 2 hanger by sticking either a crisp tube, or I've used a crisp tube at one end and a yogurt pot at the other end to stop it from collapsing in on itself with all the weight of that papier-mâché. Take your cheese box top and put it down next to your Thunderbird 1 hanger to make sure that when you build up the mountains at the back, you've left sufficient room for the Tracys to have a house to live in. And if you have cats and they're anything like mine, then they will probably come in and try and lick the flour glue. I don't know why, it's a little bit strange, but there we are. When you've got it approximately the shape you want, take some flat pieces of newspaper and stick those on over the top with a lot of flour glue, and those will help to give it a much smoother, kind of nicer look. The official Blue Peter instructions tell you that you're supposed to put tinfoil on the mountains after this, and I did try that, but I wouldn't advise it because it didn't seem to really work terribly well, and I just ended up taking it off and painting it with texture instead of having tinfoil to provide texture. Once you've got it the shape you like, then you brush it all over with some more flour glue, and then you can move on to making your Thunderbird 3 roundhouse. For the Thunderbird 3 roundhouse, I used a random plastic piece which I had left over from something I bought from IKEA. I think it was an extractor fan, but you can use something like a moisturizer tub with a hole cut in it or whatever you like, and then you attach another ring of cardboard to the bottom of that. There is so much glue necessary to make Tracy Island. And so after leaving Tracy Island for a couple of days to dry, and it's going to take a while, you might want to put it up on a cookie tray or something so the air can circulate around the bottom as well as around the top. I cut it out using my trusty Stanley knife, remembering to leave a bare patch at the front for the beach, which we'll fill in later with some sandpaper. Having done that, mix yourself some off-white or light grey paint. I started with light grey, but it got whiter as I went along because I didn't like it terribly much, and paint your Thunderbird 2 hanger. Now we're going to do Thunderbird 1 swimming pool, which means you're going to need some cardboard in an approximately rounded off square kind of shape, and you're going to need to cut a hole in the middle of that. Make sure your Thunderbird 1 toy can actually fit through the hole you've got in the cardboard, and then get yourself some blue card or just blue painted card and cut yourself a nice big swimming pool to go over the top of that. Having done that, you can get the tile effect around the edge by just painting it, or by cutting up little pieces of cardboard, painting them appropriate colours and sticking them on later. Paint the area around your swimming pool grey-ish, and then if you want to make it look more concrete-y, you can use a sponge. So you take your sponge, you dip it very, very lightly in your different shades of grey paint, 3 or 4 should do, and then you dab them on. And while that's drying and you've got the grey paint out, you can paint your roundhouse. Now, stick a hole in both pieces of cardboard, the area around the swimming pool and the swimming pool itself, and you take a brass paper fastener and attach them together, so the swimming pool is now on a hinge. And if you want, take your now hopefully dry little pieces of card and stick them around the edge to make this kind of tiled effect, which I think looks kind of cool. Yet more paint on the roundhouse because I couldn't get it the colour I wanted it to be. To make the Tracy Island house, you take the lid of your cheese box and you paint it, though try and avoid painting the edges because they're going to be like the glass balcony sides. While that's drying, you can paint Thunderbird 2's hangar door, which is just a piece of cardboard with some tinfoil over it. Actually, the tinfoil worked reasonably well for that one, and you can use your sponging effect to get kind of a rock face look on that. For the Tracy Island house, Blue Peter tells you to use matchboxes, which work perfectly well, and I do use a bit of a matchbox for the downstairs, but I had some cardboard with this kind of corrugated effect, again from IKEA, because we just, got some new furniture. And so I stuck that on instead because it looks a little bit more like windows. So you want kind of it looks like a Tetris piece, doesn't it? Sort of like that flattened capital T shape that you sometimes get. Stick them all down, leave them to dry, and then get a piece of card which is kind of cut in that flattened capital T shape and put it over the top for the roof. Once you've done that, you can cut out the ground on which the house sits, which is a little bit bigger, basically. You're going to end up painting that grey as well, and also you can cut yourself the kind of tapered piece of cardboard, cut 2 or 3 bits of thick cardboard and stick them together, and you can make a chimney. You can also use polystyrene for that, but I didn't actually have any polystyrene, so I decided I was just going to go for yet more cardboard. I made the 2 back pieces of cardboard shorter so they could sit on the actual roof, and then 1 piece on the front to cover it so it looks like it goes through the house. Then you take a small matchbox and 4 or 5 or 6, however many you fancy, pieces of drinking straw, and you paint the whole thing that wonderful shade of light grey or off-white or whatever you fancy, really. Now, preferably before you stick the supports for the house on, the little piece of drinking straw, you need to make sure that the pool and the house both fit on your Tracy Island, so you may need to do some cutting out. You glue those down, and the matchbox is the main support, but you have a couple of pieces of drinking straw to act as supports for the sides of the house so it doesn't kind of sag off to one side. After that, you can cut out a piece of cardboard for Thunderbird 2's runway, and you'll need 2 hinged pieces of card for that as well. One at the back, which will let it lift up, and one which is only attached to the runway at the other end, which will let it stay up. Most of the painting will probably take several coats, either because it doesn't get completely covered the first time or just because you feel like it. I painted the roundhouse in a couple of different shades of grey because why not? And I ended up drawing on the windows with marker pen. I'm sure there's a better way to do it. I mean, you're supposed to use stickers, but I didn't have any stickers, so I went for that. Having done that, you can get your green, brown, yellowish brown, grey, whatever shades you want of paint out and start slapping that paint on. Honestly, it looks better the more different colours you have and the more coats you do, and once you've got the basics of the colours done, you can stipple over the top of it with a brush. Remember that your colours will always dry darker than they appear when you first paint them on. So you paint them on, this is what I did anyway, you paint them on and you think, oh yes, that looks great, and then it dries and it's much darker and you think, no, that doesn't really look tropical islandy enough, it doesn't look sun-kissed, it just looks dark, looks like a rock in the middle of the North Sea. Now we need another piece of cardboard to go underneath the Thunderbird 3 roundhouse, so I just cut a slit in that to make cutting a hole in it easier because it's going to be covered over by the roundhouse anyway at that side. And you can add some grey stippling to your gravel at the bottom of the house as well, and onto the underside of your runway, which nobody is really ever going to see. The runway itself, everyone is going to see, and so it's a little bit more important to take time to get that right. But like I said, with this kind of gravelly or island painting effect. It doesn't really matter. The more different shades you put on it, the better it looks, generally. So having painted everything up, we're going to make the beach, which is just a piece of sandpaper cut to shape and then stuck on. It's actually relatively simple. Don't forget, if you're doing the cave at the back, it probably has sand in it as well, and so you'll need another piece of sandpaper. And more painting, because, like I said, the more colours you put on it, the better and more natural it looks. And then I took my marker pen and drew on the windows for the Thunderbird 2 hanger. Not terribly evenly. Someday I may go back and just paint white over the top of it and then draw them in with a pencil and then colour them in. Same for the Thunderbird 3 hanger, but for now it looks pretty good. Don't forget to put a door on the Thunderbird 3 roundhouse. That's quite important. Otherwise, how would they get in? Not that anyone's going into it, but still. Anyway, it's starting to take shape now, so you start sticking everything down properly. And that's the final thing you do, and it's very exciting because it means you're nearly finished and you can, soon look back at your work and go, how amazing is this? I couldn't be bothered to hold it down, so I put a lamp on it. Unfortunately, putting a lamp on it would not have worked for the swimming pool, which is a shame. And then we stick 2 pieces onto our Thunderbird 2 runway. You stick both sides of the small piece and stick that down, and then only one side of the big piece, which is at the far end. The palm trees, man, they are so fiddly. So those are brown pipe cleaners cut to size with green napkin. Blue Peter uses green crepe paper, but couldn't find any of that, so green napkin it was, and yeah, it doesn't look too bad. I have not shown you me making all of the palm trees because it took a really long time, but you put a hole in your papier-mâché around the sides of your Thunderbird 2 runway, and you can stick them in. Be very gentle with them. And there goes the runway, which, you can now raise up or down and support on that free swinging hinge at either end. And we've got the lichen, which I stuck at random intervals around the place. If I saw something that looked a bit dodgy, stick some plant matter over the top of it. If there was a crack or a tear or just something that didn't look quite right, stick some plant matter in there. No one can see it, it's fine. Blue Peter suggests putting sawdust in your green paint and putting that on your grassy parts to make it look more realistic, but I didn't bother with that. It also suggests that you use pieces of sponge which you've dipped in paint as plants, which you can definitely do, and I had some kitchen sponge for that very purpose. But then I discovered that in my house there is lichen, and so I used that instead. The last thing I did was to make the steps, which go from the pool to the house and from the pool to the roundhouse, which is just little bits of card stuck together and painted off white. So that's 1 and 2, and that is Tracy Island finished. So you can see the runway and the swimming pool, which moves, and Thunderbird 1 can go inside there, and a little cave round the back for Thunderbird 4. And that's how you do it.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thunderbirds are go.